Many years ago, when my son was 15, he told me about this video game called Five Nights at Freddy's. He loved it. The basic premise was the player assumes the role of a nighttime employee who must utilize tools such as security cameras, lights, doors, vents, whatever they can get a hold of to defend themselves against animatronic characters who inhabit the locations and become mobile and hostile at night. The series' lore is gradually revealed through voice recordings, mini-games, Easter eggs featured throughout the game. So think of an evil version of Chuck E. Cheese. Although, if I had to choose between spending a night at Chuck E. Cheese or spending the night fighting off these Freddy characters trying to kill me, I'd still probably pick Freddy's. I bet you the pizza's better. Now, my son loved this game, and it's very popular. Since its release, it has spawned 9 follow-ups and has sold 34 million units. Now, due to its popularity, Hollywood turned its eye to this gaming franchise back in 2015. However, it took 7 years for this project to get off the ground. Finally, production began last year, and this weekend gave us the release of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Now, other than the basic storyline of this game, I know nothing about this universe. I do know it has a very active and very rabid fan base. But early buzz for this film was pretty negative, so I kind of checked out. But my son, even all these years later, is still a fan of this, and he really wanted me to take him to see this movie. I mean, basically, he wanted me to pay for it so he wouldn't have to pay for himself. So, off we went this past Saturday to check it out. So, what do we got here? Is it a good movie? Is it a shit movie? Is it something that only the fans are going to like? Does it stick to the game? Does it stick to the lore? Well, before we answer that, let's talk a little bit about the plot to Five Nights at Freddy's. So, our story begins. After assaulting a negligent father whom he mistook for a kidnapper, mall security guard Mike Schmidt is sent to visit career counselor Steve Raglan. He offers Mike a job as a guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a once successful but now abandoned family entertainment center. Though initially reluctant, Mike accepts the offer after social services threaten to take custody of his younger sister Abby and pass her over to their estranged Aunt Jane. This is a night job. Mike does not really want it, but he has no choice. On his first night, Mike falls asleep and dreams about his brother Garrett's kidnapping, which happened years earlier, and presumed murder, before seeing 5 children who witnessed it. When Mike tries to approach them, they run away. On the second night, Mike's dream is repeated. But when he attempts to confront one of the children, he is attacked and he wakes up. Mike then meets police officer Vanessa Shelley, who notices that Mike has wounds on his arm, which is very surprising to him since he thought this was just a dream. She patches him up. She then shows him around the restaurant and tells him that it closed in the 80s after 5 children were murdered there, their bodies never found. Now, the next night, Mike is forced to bring his sister Abby to the job because there is no one to watch her. This is where he is finally confronted with the living animatronic Five Nights at Freddy's crew. And in order to save his sister's life, Mike teams with Vanessa to attempt to defeat these evil entities. A pretty interesting premise, actually. In fact, I've always kind of thought that this series of games sounded interesting, and if I was a gamer, I would be playing it. Now, this movie has really divided critics and fans. If you go on Rotten Tomatoes, you can see that 25% of the critics liked it, which means 75% did not. But on the fan side, it has a 90% rating. So who is correct here? Well, like a Chinese restaurant on a lunch special, it's a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. We get solid performances from our cast of mainly B and C listers or up-and-coming performers. The animatronic Five Nights at Freddy's crew, they're pretty frightening and realistic. We even get some scenes that really push the line between PG-13 and rated R movies. And unlike a lot of horror movies, we get a ton of backstory here, which dealing with a franchise like this that's been around for more than a decade is a pretty good thing, especially for your hardcore fans. And when the action really amps up, you can feel the sense of the walls closing in on you as the Freddy's crew hunt you and hunt the protagonist through the abandoned, dark, and claustrophobic pizzeria. Now on the negative side, the movie's a bit long. You know, horror movies, I always think they should be about 90 minutes. It usually tells the story. This is almost 2 hours, and at times it does feel it drags. Plus, PG-13 horror just doesn't carry the same weight as rated R horror. Also, it's a little disjointed at times because it brings us into the world of Freddy and his animatronic nightmare pals, but then next thing you know, it's daytime and we're getting a lot of backstory. It jumps back and forth like this too often. I think it would have been better if we got the backstory at first and then went right into the horror parts. It would have been more engaging. So, it's creepy rather than scary, and it's more of a ghost story than a monster/slasher film. You know, it's frightening, but it feels a little toothless for something with so many killer robots. This goes back to that PG-13 rating. To be honest though, it had to be PG-13. The fans of this franchise, they skew younger. If you made it an R-rated film, it probably wouldn't do nearly as well. And I can tell you from my theater experience that more than half the crowd were young teenagers. So, if you eliminate them, you're cutting out a lot of the profit for this movie. Now, speaking of profit, this movie has already made $80 million worldwide with only a $20 million budget. And because of this, it already has 2 sequels in the pipeline. Bottom line, Five Nights at Freddy's, it was overall a bit too long, but it's pretty much a solid movie. It did right by its source material, according to my son, who said that other than some minor changes, it stuck pretty true to the lore. If you're a fan of the games, you'll probably really like this. But if you're like me, you don't really know that much about the games, you're still probably going to enjoy it. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. That's my little homage to Matthew Perry, may he rest in peace. Well, that's it from me this week. Please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, hit the notification button as well, and share this video with friends and enemies alike. Tune in next week for the movie gospel according to Normie. And as always, thank you for giving me your valuable time, and I'll see you next week. Take care.